Hey there! The topic that we will be discussing is voting. So, what is voting? It is a tool used by groups of people in making a collective decision. It can be presented conveniently in terms of an election system. It is also the process of aggregating the preferences of individuals in a way that attempts to describe the preferences of an entire population or group. Best example of this is when you and your friends vote out for the best restaurant option to go for lunch, or voting to determine who should be let into a small group of decision makers, such as deciding how many seats should go to students, faculty, and administration on a university decision board. There are as many different voting systems in the world as there are elected assemblies. The one thing they have in common is their reliance on mathematics to calculate the results.
Tinan mo, oh. Pwede.
Uy, hindi pa ba tayo kakain? Gutom na kami, friend.
Ay, ako din friend, nagugutom na ako. Saan tayo kakain?
Oo nga, gutom na rin ako eh. Saan tayo kakain?
Saan ba tayo kakain? Nagugutom na rin ako.
Saan nga ba?
Saan ba? Mga yung nagtatanong eh. Saan ba? Saan ba kasi masarap? Saan ba?
Sabit lang naman ako dito eh.
Bakit saan ba?
Friend, saan ba? Kahit saan? Doon na lang tayo. O tara, lakad na tayo.
Ano? Parang gusto ko ng pizza.
Ay, pizza. Dito.
Pero friend, tight budget ko ngayon. Akala ko ba gusto mo ng pizza?
Ay, ito na lang, friend. Ito na lang.
Gutom na. Eh friend, ayoko ng itlog. Bakit? Allergic ako sa itlog. May gamot naman.
Eh, saan pa talaga tayo kakain?
Oh, ayan na. Yan ang pagkain.
Ano ba yan?
Alam mo, nahihili pa tayo kanina. Delata din naman pala yung gusto nyo. Saan pala yan? Eh, kumuha ka na nga ng pambukas dun. Oh, magandang yan. Okay na.
The voting systems deals with different voting methods and procedures. There are various kinds of voting systems. So let's start with the first one, and this is called the majority system. Majority means that more than 50% of the total voters favor a certain candidate. The majority voting system applied for an election and with only two candidates. This determines who is the winner between the two. So basically, ang majority system, nag-a-apply lang po siya para sa dalawang kandidato at kung sino man ang makakakuha ng 50% or more than 50% of the total voters population ang mananalo. But what do you think if there were 3 or 4 candidates? How do we determine who will be the winner if ang majority system natin is only applicable for 2? So that is where the preference ballots enter the scene. So preference ballots, so these are ballots in which voters choose not only their favorite candidate, but they order all the candidates from their most favorite down to their least favorite. So basically, nirarank nila dito yung mga kandidato na pinaka-gusto nila, gusto lang nila, at yung mga kandidato na hindi nila gusto. So, let's take a look at an example.
Let's imagine that you and your two friends, Jim and John, are on your way home from a party. The three of you want to get something to eat before you head home. All three of you immediately call out a different preference, so there's no clear majority in favor of any option. But all of you want equal say in the decision about where to eat. So you propose voting on 2 options at a time to figure out what the group's preferences are. So you first say tacos versus burgers. Which do you guys want? Personally, you want pizza more than anything, but you'd also be alright with tacos. Burgers sound awful right now, so you vote tacos. Jim, he votes burgers. John votes tacos. So tacos are the clear winner. But since pizza wasn't even on the table for the last vote, you ask for another round of voting to see how pizza ranks against the current winner. Your friends agree.
To understand how a preference ballot works and how to determine the winner, let us look at the example below. Suppose there will be an election being held to determine who will be the class president. The choices candidates are as follows: Laney for candidate M, Marcus for candidate C, and Stone for candidate S. Now that has been cast, we must count the ballots. But it is not as simple as just counting how many voters like each candidate. You must look at how many like the candidate in the first place, second place, and third place. So there needs to be a better way to organize the results. This is known as the preference schedule.
Preference schedule is a table used to organize the results of all the preference ballots in an election. So we're just going to narrow down and simplify the preference ballots that we have, and then once it was simplified, we will be able to determine the winner of the election by using different voting methods. So the first one that we're going to talk about is the plurality method. Plurality method of voting is the most usual form of voting, with the basic principles that having the greatest number of first place votes is declared as the winner. It is also an electoral process in which the candidate who polls more votes than any other candidate is elected. And plurality method, it is commonly used in the selection of offices in such large organizations such as trade unions and professional associations, and in arriving at decisions at meetings of board of directors and trustees. So let's take a look at an example.
The most straightforward solution would be to just let each individual cast a single ballot and choose the location with the most votes. This is known as plurality voting, or first past the post. In this case, West Base wins easily since it has more residents than any other, and yet most colonists would consider this the worst result given how far it is from everyone else. So, is plurality vote really the fairest method? What if we tried a system like instant runoff voting, which accounts for the full range of people's preferences rather than just their top choices? Here's how it would work. First, voters rank each of the options from 1 to 4, and we compare their top picks. South receives the fewest votes for first place, so it's eliminated. Its 15 votes get allocated to those voters' second choice, East Base, giving it a total of 32. We then compare top preferences and cut the last place option again. This time, North Base is eliminated. Its residents' second choice would have been South Base, but since that's already gone, the votes go to their third choice. That gives East 58 votes over West's 42, making it the winner.
The next method that we have is the board account method, or the point system. In this method, each candidate is assigned a weight according to their rank in the preference list. So for n number of candidates, the highest rank or the most favorite will have n points, and the lowest rank or the least favorite will have 1 point. So for example, there are 3 voters who choose the order of MCS. So candidate M receives 3 times 3, and that would be 9 points for the first place. Candidate C receives 3 times 2, and that would be 6 points, or 6 points rather. And candidate S receives 3 times 1, and that would be 3 points for those ballots. The same process is conducted for the other columns, and the table below summarizes the points that each candidate received. The board account is the sum of these weights given to a candidate, and the candidate who receives the highest board account will be the winner of the election. Let's take a look at an example.
This is how the board account method works. The board account method was designed to avoid some of the problems with the simple plural method. The Borders count method formula is number of vote times the value of choices. The value of choices are first choice is equals to 3, second choice is equals to 2, and the third choice is equals to 1. In the example, you will see how it works. Lenny got in the first choice 9 and 3. In the second choice, Lani got 8 and 18. In the third choice, Lani got 1. In Marcus got in the first choice 12 and 3. In the second choice, Marcus got 6. In the third choice, Marcus got 1 and 9. Stone got in the first choice 27. In the second choice, got Stone 2 and 2. In the third choice, Stone got 1 and 9. Now, if we add up all the points that were allocated for each candidate, the results will be as follows. Lani got 9 plus 3 plus 8 plus 1 plus 18 equals to 39. Marcus got 6 plus 1 plus 12 plus 9 plus 3 equals to 31. Stone got 3 plus 2 plus 4 plus 2 plus 27 equals to 38. Thus, Lani wins using the board account method. So, who is the winner? With one method, Stone wins, and with another method, Lani wins. The problem is that it all depends on which method to use. Therefore, you need to decide which method to use before you run the election.
Another voting method that we have is the plurality method with elimination. So plurality with elimination is a variation of the plurality method in which the alternative of the voters is taken into consideration. The candidates with the fewest number of votes is first eliminated. So let's check out an example.
Plurality method with elimination example. So here's the table. This is not the most exciting example since there are only 3 candidates, but the process is the same whether there are 3 or many more. So look at how many first place votes there are. M has 3 plus 1, C has 4 plus 1, and S has 9. So M is eliminated from the preference schedule since M got lowest count of first place votes. Now we can condense the table and simplify it to look like this. As you can see, C has 8 first place votes, S has 10. So with this method, the plurality method with elimination, S wins the elections.
The next voting method that we have is the top 2 runoff method. In this method, the 2 candidates with the greatest number of first place votes are removed from the preference list and are re-ranked for a new preference list between 2 candidates will be declared the winner. The top 2 runoff methods satisfies most criteria.
The two-round system is a voting method used to elect a single winner, where the voter casts a single vote for their chosen candidate. Despite its name, the two-round system may resolve an election in a single round if one candidate receives enough of the vote, usually a simple majority. If no candidate receives enough of the vote in the first round, then a second round of voting is held with either just the top 2 candidates or all candidates who received a certain proportion of the votes. The two-round system is used around the world for the election of legislative bodies and directly elected presidents. For example, it is used in French presidential, legislative, and departmental elections, and in elections for Iran's parliament and for the Czech Senate. In Italy, it is used to elect mayors, but also to decide which party or coalition receives a majority bonus in city councils. A two-round system is used also to elect the presidents of Afghanistan, Argentina, Austria, Benin, Bolivia.
And then we have the approval voting system. So in this type of voting, a vote may choose more than one option or candidate. Each vote coming from one voter will be counted as one vote, and the one with the greatest number of votes will be declared as the winner in this method. Well, let's check an example.
Approval voting system example. Since there is no completely fair voting method, people have been trying to come up with new methods over the years. One idea is to have the voters decide whether they approve or disapprove of candidates in an election. This way, the voter can decide that they would be happy with some of the candidates but would not be happy with the other ones. A possible ballot in this situation is shown in the table. As you can see in the table, there are 4 candidates. This voter would approve of Smith or Paulson but would not approve of Baker or James. In this type of election, the candidate with the most approval votes wins the election. One issue with the approval voting is that it tends to elect the least disliked candidate instead of the best candidate. Another issue is that it can result in insincere voting as described above. As a reminder, there is no perfect voting method. Arrow proved that there will never be one, so make sure that you determine the method of voting that you will use before you conduct an election.
The fairness criteria. Which voting method is fair, and what do we mean by fair? The following are 4 separate ways to define fairness in voting options. Number 1. Majority fairness criterion. If a candidate receives a majority of first place votes, that candidate should win the election. Take note that using the majority method obviously will satisfy this criterion, which is the majority criterion. However, some methods fail the rule of majority criterion, which are the plurality method, approval voting, and board account method.
In this table, we see that the voters gave each candidate a rank. The first place gets 3 points, the second place gets 2 points, the third place gets 1 point, and the fourth place gets 0 points. Let us look at this table. Who would be the winner here? So let's check. For candidate A, 6 times 3 is equal to 18. For candidate B, 2 times 3 plus 6 times 2 plus 3 will become 6 plus 12 plus 3, a total of 21. For candidate C, 3 times 3 plus 2 times 2 plus 6 will become 9 plus 4 plus 6, a total of 19. For candidate D, 3 times 2 plus 2 will become 6 plus 2, a total of 8. So candidate B wins by the board account method. However, if we use the majority, the total number of votes is 11. Therefore, A wins by the majority, because 6 is greater than 50 of 11, which is 5.5. So, we have different winners. That is why we see the board account fails the majority criterion. Monotonicity criterion. Basically, it requires that the winning candidate must not lose by being ranked higher by a voter, or the losing candidate must not win by being ranked lower. Suppose A is the winner of the original election. If one or more voters who voted for other candidates were to change their choice to A, then A should still be the winner of the new election. And here we see that the voters were to rank each candidate from first to third. If the voters change their votes to increase the preference for a candidate, it should not harm the candidate's chances of winning. Let me illustrate that the Hare system fails the monotonicity criterion. First, let's look at the winner under the Hare system. For candidate A, 7 plus 4 is equal to 11. But is that already the winner? How many votes do we have? 7 plus 8 plus 10 plus 4 is equal to 29. So 11 is less than 50%. So we eliminate the candidate in the last position, and that is candidate B. So if that is the case, we have A over C, which is 7 plus 4, is equal to 11. C over A, which is 8 plus 10, is equal to 18. Therefore, the winner here is candidate C. Suppose that there is a re-election, and suppose that candidate C, who is the winner from the first election, changed his or her mind, and for the rest, they did not. They prefer candidate C over candidate A. Take note that C already won, so what do we expect when they, the 4 voters, change their minds? It is favorable for candidate C because he is in the first place now instead of candidate A. Now let us look at the winner under the Hare system here. So now candidate C had 14 votes and candidate A has 7 votes and candidate B has 8. So now what will we eliminate? 14 and 29, but it's still not yet the majority because 29 of 15% is 14.5. So it's not yet the majority. So we have to proceed to the next step, and that is to eliminate candidate A. So we are left with candidate B and candidate C. So for B over C, 7 plus 8 is equal to 15. Then for C over B, 10 plus 4 is equal to 14. Therefore, the winner here is candidate B. It should have been candidate C, right? Because when the voters change their minds, it is favorable to candidate C, but B wins. So, what went wrong? In this case, using the Hare system, candidate A got eliminated, whereas in the first election, we eliminated candidate B instead of candidate A. Condorcet criterion. If a candidate wins over other candidates in all head-to-head matchups using the majority rule, then this candidate must also be the winner when all candidates appear on the ballot.
Can a system be called fair and good if it incentivizes lying about your preferences? Maybe what we need to do is let voters express a preference in every possible head-to-head matchup. This is known as the Condorcet method. Consider one matchup, West versus North. All 100 colonists vote on their preference between the two, so that's West's 42 versus the 58 from North, South, and East, who would all prefer North. Now do the same for the other 5 matchups. The victor will be whichever base wins the most times. Here, North wins 3 and South wins 2. These are indeed the 2 most central locations, and North has the advantage of not being anyone's least preferred choice. So, does that make the Condorcet method an ideal voting system in general? Not necessarily.
Independence of irrelevant alternative. A winning candidate in an election remains the winner in any recount, even if the losing candidates withdraw from the election.
Independence of irrelevant alternative. Let us say the 2016 Philippine vice presidential election has Mrs. Leni Robredo of Liberal Party and Mr. Bongbong Marcos as independent. These are the 2 viable candidates. It is 100% probability that one of these 2 will win the election. Let us assume that Mrs. Robredo wins with a majority vote of 35.11%. The best candidate has won. Now, let us throw an irrelevant alternative into the mix. Mr. Honasan, who has a 0 chance of winning the election. However, his ideals are closely aligned with Mrs. Robredo, resulting in a 50-50 split between the 2 candidates. Even though Mr. Honasan did not stand a chance of winning, his presence on the ballot took away Mrs. Robredo's chance of winning, therefore violating the independence of irrelevant alternatives. In the illustration, Leni Robredo got 14,418,817 or 35.11% of votes. Bongbong Marcos got 14,155,344 or 34.47%. And Gregorio Honasan got 788,881 or 1.92%. Therefore, the winner is Leni Robredo for Vice President.